Now, vaping on an e-cigarette is much less harmful than smoking regular cigarettes. That's according to MPs who say the rules around using them should be relaxed. In their report, they suggest that e-cigarettes could be allowed on buses and trains and should be available on prescription to help people give up smoking. But is enough known about the long-term health impact? What about the science? Here's Chris Cunningham.
Once a rare sight, there's now an estimated 3 million people in the UK who vape. And although by no means considered risk-free, even a committee of MPs is now saying that e-cigarettes are far better for your health than their tobacco-burning counterparts. But for many of the UK's 7 million traditional smokers, there's still an unhealthy amount of scepticism.
I would never consider vaping because I think they're dangerous. And from what I've read, the chemicals in there, who knows what's in there, so I would not touch it.
I don't think either of them are good for you, are they? So if you're going to quit, you better quit altogether than get a vape.
I think it's become a fashion thing as well. I wouldn't want to be involved.
This side we fill and cap the bottles.
Here at a state-of-the-art e-cigarette factory in Guildford, they make some of the machines, flavours and accessories, feeding an industry estimated to be worth around £700 million a year in the UK alone. An industry doing all it can to see people stub out their fags for something with a bit more flavour.
I was a 20-a-day smoker for 20 years. I tried NRT, nicotine replacement therapy, hypnotism, none of which worked for me. And within 3 weeks of trying electronic cigarettes, I had stopped smoking and I haven't smoked since.
These are much safer than these. Well, that's the basic message here anyway. And it's not just being put forward by those actually making money out of the e-cigarette boom.
MPs on the Science and Technology Committee released a report today saying that misconceptions about e-cigarettes mean the government is missing the opportunity to tackle smoking-related deaths, currently the largest cause of death in the UK. According to the report, e-cigarettes are 95% less harmful than conventional ones and are currently being used by around 500,000 people as a stop smoking aid. It calls for a relaxing of regulations, for e-cigarettes to be available on prescription and for companies to be able to advertise their products' health benefits. It also calls for a rethink on how much these products are taxed and how they're allowed to be used in public spaces.
This is all about harm reduction. Nobody's saying it's completely safe. But if you take the evidence seriously of Public Health England, the British Heart Foundation, Cancer Research UK, the British Medical Association, and many more bodies who all say that vaping is significantly less harmful than smoking.
However, not everyone is convinced that vapour is the panacea to solve smoking-related diseases.
Personally, I think that we should be more sceptical that vaping in the long term is safe. So whilst I support changing to e-cigarettes and as a smoking cessation tool, and also probably in the longer term, if you can't stop smoking, they will be safer. People should be aware that I think that they are putting them at risk, themselves at risk of swapping one disease for another.
If today's recommendations are followed, we could see e-cigarettes being increasingly used as a weapon in the fight against smoking. But for now, what everyone does agree on is that vapour or smoke, the only truly safe option, is to stop.
Well, I'm joined now by Martin McKee, who is Professor of European Public Health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and Deborah Arnott, Chief Executive of Action on Smoking and Health, otherwise known as ASH. Welcome to you both. Let me start with you, Professor. You have written, I believe, that the international evidence is now so strong that these products, e-cigarettes, reduce the probability of quitting.
That's right. There was a systematic review bringing together 38 studies.
That's completely counter to what the MPs have heard, isn't it?
Well, I don't think it is, actually, because if you look at the written evidence that was submitted to the MPs, it was in the written evidence, but it's true that it wasn't in the evidence that they called for oral submissions.
So why do you think that they actually reduce the probability of quitting?
I think when people are unable to stop smoking, unable to smoke indoor and in their offices and so on, often we've heard people talk about how they will use an electronic cigarette to keep the nicotine going. I think it's speculative. I'm not absolutely sure why that's the case, but it does seem to be what is being reported.
But it's completely contrary to the gist of what MPs have just been telling us.
Well, it is, but also it's consistent with other evidence. So we've just had a large clinical trial published from the University of Pennsylvania that looked at whether or not e-cigarettes could help people to quit, and it found, as they said explicitly, no additional benefit.
Deborah Arnott, do you agree?
No, I don't. I think if you look at the systematic review, it has significant flaws in terms of who's included in the review and who isn't.
Right.
And actually, the evidence from the UK is very clear. When you look at what Public Health England's assessment has shown, what the Royal College of Physicians' assessment has shown, the assessment of the BMA and various other experts, research done by the University of...
So who's right?
Well, it's difficult to know, except that what we're seeing in England and in the UK as a whole is that e-cigarettes, as part of a broader campaign to reduce smoking prevalence, are forming part of a trend in decline in smoking amongst adults,
right,
which is faster than anywhere else in the world at the current time, and also reduction in youth uptake. So the broader trends coincide with e-cigarettes coming onto the market and playing a role in helping smokers quit.
But this is quite alarming, is it? So the two of you have differing opinions. There do seem to be differing opinions in the broader landscape out there. And yet, you know, this government, this parliament is on the verge of publishing major policy reviews regarding public health and smoking of e-cigarettes, with big consequences for all of us.
But the evidence is that in the UK, we're seeing people quitting, using e-cigarettes.
Right.
They are the most popular quitting aid by smokers. Stop smoking services that encourage and support smokers using e-cigarettes to quit are getting higher quit rates and more success. Okay. So, you know, what can I say?
Well, I think we have to look at the more detailed data. The PATH study from the United States that was published recently followed up 2,000 people who were either sole e-cigarette users or dual users. And in fact, a number of the sole e-cigarette users were people who had not previously smoked, and looked at what happened over the course of a year. And it is absolutely true, a number of them did quit. But twice as many moved the other way, either from sole e-cigarette use to dual use or to sole smoking.
Was this report that was compiled for the MPs compiled with the help of Big Tobacco? Were they hugely involved?
4 of them did give oral evidence. There was a relatively small number of people who gave oral evidence. Many more gave written evidence. But much of the written evidence is not referred to at all in the report, including some by some very eminent toxicologists.
Do you think the MPs were hoodwinked?
I can't possibly say.
I don't think they were hoodwinked. I don't agree with all their findings, but I think the report is balanced and it's in line with what Public Health England say. It's in line with what the Department of Health and Social Care say. It's in line with the Royal College of Physicians, the BMA. Martin is the outlier, not the rest of England.
Well, I think we need to look at the international scene. So the view that I hold is held by the World Health Organization, the National Association of Science in the United States. The European Respiratory Societies, in response to a paper from England recently, wrote a really damning comment, and they said there is little evidence that these are effective in quitting, and we see the tobacco industry using them as a gateway. So internationally, in Australia and the rest of the world,
well, that's
we see a very
not
different
quite
picture.
accurate, actually, because the World Health Organization has said they have a role to play, but they should be properly regulated. And in fact, our regulations are in line with what's recommended by WHO, and also the EU regulations.
So here's another point, which is fascinating. The idea that one should be allowed to vape in confined spaces, on public transport, in trains, in cinemas. Personally, I find the idea of that rather unappealing.
Well,
is that going too far?
I think there's a good... The Department of Health decided that the legislation to ban smoking in public places should not be extended to include e-cigarettes, and we'd agree with that. But that doesn't mean to say that everyone would like vaping to go on everywhere. I mean, the BBC, I don't know about Channel 4, but at the BBC you're not allowed to vape, and it was done for courtesy reasons, not health. Because actually lots of people vaping in an enclosed space is not pleasant.
Martin, what about this argument that we heard from Norman Lamb earlier, that certainly when it comes to mental health, 40% of mental health patients smoke cigarettes. Yeah. Vaping is not allowed in 30% of mental health institutions, and this is one opportunity to get them off the cigs, onto something less harmful?
I should say that I think nicotine replacement therapy, whether it's through e-cigarettes or through patches, has a role to play where it is part of a structured cessation program, and I think we would agree with that. Where nicotine replacement therapy doesn't work is when it's available over the counter. We may disagree on that, but I don't think the evidence supports that. So if it is part of an intervention, and this is one way of getting nicotine to people for a short period of time, then it may have a role.
Right.
But I think we just don't know about the long term.
And Deborah, in 5 seconds, a gateway to smoking cigarettes, if you start, especially for young people?
We were very concerned to check whether this was the case. In fact, ASH did the first research and carries it out every year.
You say no.
No, it's not showing that. We have the lowest youth smoking rates ever recorded.
And you disagree with that?
I published a paper in the Journal of Adolescent Health, which actually shows differently.
We beg to differ. Deborah Arnott, Martin McKee, thank you.